Hey everybody, this is my 125 gallon native tank, and if you're familiar with this tank you'll know that it looks all discombobulated. The lights are out and the middle's all dark. What's going on is my shop lamp that I have on top there burned out. I have not yet pulled it apart or taken it off the top of the tank to find out whether it's the tubes themselves that have burned out or if it's the ballast and the electronics that have burned out. I think the light itself is burned out, the electronics that is. We had some power outages yesterday. It was a really windy day and the power cut out and came right back on. It's almost like a flicker type effect. And a lot of times electronic equipment will suffer under those circumstances, and since the shop light I'm using is a very, very low budget shop lamp and only costs $11 and some change up at the Wally World, I suspect that's what happened. It just sort of burned out the ballast or whatever. So I have got a replacement for it, and I'm going to go ahead and get working on that. But in the meantime, what we're going to do, I want to see what this tank looks like with just LEDs on it. And if you look at the way we've got all this flickering light, you lose a lot of that effect when you put the shop lamp on in addition to the LEDs. If it's only LEDs, I will get much more noticeable flickering effect like that. If you will also notice the tremendous amount of green hair algae or Spirogyra algae that I have growing on the glass, that's also from these LEDs. They're very low budget LEDs. They produce a very low quality light that is very favorable to the growth of algae, more so than it is for the growth of other plants, more desirable plants like the Rotala there you can see behind the algae on the other side of the glass. So I don't intend on keeping it lit only with the LEDs. I really do like that sparkle effect, but these just aren't a high enough quality LED to give me a high enough quality light to keep the algae to a minimum. So what's probably going to happen is we'll have a little fun today. I'm going to get in there, I'm going to do a water change, I'm going to wipe the glass down and get all that algae off of there so the tank looks nice and pretty again. And then I'm going to take the LEDs that I have in the other room. These are actually just little, I don't know how well you'll be able to see it with the room dark like this. Oh, there you go. These are little outdoor floodlights that I've bought on Amazon, and I only paid $10 or $12 a piece for them. I don't recommend them. They're really poor quality, as I said. Most of them have burned out over the time. I bought a bunch of them. They were hit or miss. They all claimed to be 6,500K or 10,000K, and you'd get them and you'd look at the light and it's this yellowy, orange light. It was probably 2,500K and they're claiming it's 10,000. And so I'd send half of them back because I could just see that they weren't anywhere near where I wanted them. And so through a lot of trial and error and buying a bunch of them and sending a bunch of them back, I wound up with a bunch that I consider to be in that 6,500K to 10,000K range, and that's what you get here. You get this effect. So I do have several more of these in the other room, and once I get this burned out shop lamp off of the top here, I'm going to go ahead and reposition all the LEDs on the tank so we have the full effect of LEDs all the way across the whole tank, and it'll be lit solely with the LEDs. We can have a little look at that, have some fun, and then I can go ahead and get back into putting another light back on the top of it. One thing I actually think I might do in this one is this tank is lit with two Coral Life units that have two T5 high output tubes in it. So I've actually got 4 high output T5s on this 55 gallon tank, and it's really, really brightly lit. I really do like it brightly lit like this, but have a look at what it looks like with only one T5 on it, or one of the units. That it's fine like that. That's what you would probably expect a fish tank to be lit like, or as brightly lit as that. So what I may wind up doing when I get the other tank fixed up is get rid of the LEDs altogether and use one of these Coral Life fixtures on this tank that I clearly don't need. I can just use the single fixture on this tank, and then I can use that other fixture in conjunction with the shop light, and then we might see how that actually lights this tank up. So sit tight, let me get started. I think the next look we will have will be with the LEDs on it all the way across here. Let me straighten up this so that we get a nice proper before and after. So there's a look at your before, and as I said, here in a few minutes we'll take a look and see what it looks like with nothing but LEDs on it. So I opted not to worry about the glass or anything just yet. We will get to doing a water change, and we will look at the tank when I'm done with it, when I actually get the new lighting on it. I'm not going to keep the LEDs on here, and after getting them all plugged in and everything, I mean, I've got an octopus worth of wires behind this tank as it is, and having, I don't know, 8 LEDs on top of this thing or whatever I've got is just way too much, even if I was going to go with the full LED lighting on this tank. But it is worth looking at. It is, you know, fun to compare since I'm doing this anyway. You can definitely see where each individual unit is sitting on the top, and you can see the sort of beams of light coming down from each central location. So that's definitely a different effect than you get that sort of homogeneous, evenly spread light from the tubes. But this gives you more of centralized locations with the beams shining down through the water. Again, it gives you that sort of sunlight effect that you just don't get with other sources of light. So I really do like that. You can see the floating vegetation creating the shadows in the water, and then of course the ripples on the glass, or the appearance of ripples on the glass, is simply the light shining down through the water from the LEDs. So I really do like that effect. I like that sparkle. It gives it a very natural sunlight effect that you simply cannot get with other forms of lighting, or at least none that I've seen other than the LEDs. But alas, they are very low quality LEDs, and we're not going to stay with them in the long run. Here, give me a moment to come all the way on the other side of the room and get the overhead light on. And I did cover everything back up just so that it wouldn't, you know, you wouldn't be able to see it for the video. So that's what we're looking at on top of the tank right now. It's all these little units scattered around everywhere. So that's 4, 7, 11 of them on there. This unit is actually for a reef tank, nano tank, and that is a 10,000K, very bright. This is actually a fairly high quality LED. It's not high enough quality for me, but that is one that if I was going to use an LED on any one of my tanks, I would go with that one. All of these others are just those cheap little floodlights I was talking about. They have these little brackets on them, and they're literally meant to be outdoor floodlights that you mount on your garage or outside your back porch or something. Not suited for fish tanks. I do, however, have my new light set up. I switched out the tubes that were in the old one, and they lit right up as soon as I plugged it in, so I was right, it was the fixture, not the tubes. So we are going to start working on getting that fixture put back on. And when I've got everything taken off the top, that's when I'll get in there and I'll do a water change, and I'll get the tank wiped down. And the next time we look at the tank, it'll actually be put back together, hopefully. Or who knows, maybe we'll see some little bit of action in the middle while I'm doing some work on it if I come across anything worth noting. So give me a few minutes and I'll see you at the next stage. Alright, the way I'm cleaning up the glass this time is a little different than I normally do, so I thought I would get some of it on film. The way I normally do it is I wait until the water level is low enough, and then I use some of my filter material, the polyester batting, and I wipe the glass down as best I can to remove as much of the algae above the water surface as I can. I don't want to wipe it off underwater and disturb it and swirl all that loose algae and all those cells around in the water. That's just spreading it around and making it worse. So while using the polyfill to wipe it out, or using the polyester batting in my case to wipe it out, that's all well and good. I'll show you a piece of what I'm talking about. I can use this stuff to wipe it out, and it removes a lot of it, but it still gets a lot of it back in the water. So what I've been doing today is using a standard razor blade, and I've been scraping along the glass and scraping up and out, and since it's hair algae, it tends to stay together. And what I've resulted in is each scoop I pull it out and I wipe some of the algae off onto this paper towel, and that's how much algae I've pulled off so far. just from scraping the glass down to where you can see. Now I'm going to let the water level get down to probably about here, so we'll be able to scrape a good deal of this off of the glass while I'm in there, and it'll simply be removed from the tank. I won't be scraping it underwater like a lot of people do, or wiping it down as I was just explaining and distributing it around the tank. I'll be actually physically removing it. So while that will certainly not remove the algae or prevent it from being in the tank, it's just one of those little things that helps you stay on top of it. It keeps it from coming back quite so fast and quite so vigorously. So it's just helpful to try to get as much of it out of the tank as possible without really spreading it around. The other thing I do on stuff like this wood and this rock, there's not a lot I can do as far as wiping it off, but if you'll notice very closely, you can see all the little bubbles. That is because I've gently sprayed the surface with hydrogen peroxide. Now, I talk about hydrogen peroxide all the time, so I will once again say I don't recommend using it, but there are different kinds of hydrogen peroxide. Not all hydrogen peroxide is created the same. What I use and what you probably have around your house is regular old household 3%. Oh, let me try and find my bottle here. Oh, lost it for a minute. I just use that's 3% solution. You'll see that written right on the bottle somewhere if it focuses. So that's just regular old hydrogen peroxide topical solution. You can get this at any pharmacy or any place like that. It's important to use the 3% if you're going to use it around your tank at all. There is a 9% solution available, and if you have certain connections in the industrial world, you can get up to 30%. That is something altogether different. What I'm talking about is using the simple household variety of 3%. Using 3% hydrogen peroxide, as long as you don't have any hypersensitive fish in your tank, you can put up to about 2.5 to 3 milliliters of the household 3%. You can put about 3 milliliters of this per gallon in your water for short periods of time without actually causing any serious or long-term injury to your animals. So in a case like this, all I'm doing is spritzing the rock down a little bit, like so. And while that may seem like a lot, that probably was not 8 mil. One full squeeze of this trigger, I've measured it out, I have to do 3 full squeezes of this trigger will give me 5 mil. And again, I can do 3 mil per gallon in this tank. So that little bit of spray that I was doing right there onto the surface of the wood and the surface of the rock, and remember, most of that was getting on the wood and the rock, not in the tank itself. So again, as long as you keep track of how much you're spraying, how much is in the tank, you know, and you know what acceptable amounts and the kinds of fish you have, hydrogen peroxide can be quite useful. It can also be very dangerous. Just a little bit too much or leaving it in the tank a little too long, the wrong kind of fish. There's just, you know, again, I really don't recommend using it unless you really know what you're doing or you're comfortable with the idea that you may make a mistake and lose some fish, and that's going to be part of your learning curve. So let me get back to it. Again, I'm going to gently try to remove as much of this algae as I can now that I've got a little more space above the water here, and I will also keep on top of the hydrogen peroxide on the rock there and see how much I can actually get killed off before we start filling the tank back up. From that point, we will put the new lights on, and I think what I'm going to do is, well, you'll see what I'm going to do. So sit tight and I'll see you for the last part. Alright everybody, while we're waiting for the tank to fill back up, let's have a look at the 2 different light fixtures we're going to put on and compare them and maybe look at a few of the pros and cons between the 2. The one on the right you can see is the nice sleek Coral Life fixture. It's got these little metal brackets on it in case you've got an open top tank and you need to hang it over the edge to secure it on there. It's also got a little polycarbonate shield to protect the tubes if they shatter or to protect any water from splashing on the tubes. It's got an on-off switch. This also has a feature where if the power shuts off and the light is warm, you cannot turn it back on until it is cooled down a little bit. It takes about 5 or 10 minutes before you can turn them back on. So the other day when the power was flicking on and off, this fixture went off and stayed off. It didn't come back on. Whereas this fixture, some of the pros and cons on this are there's no switch. You simply plug it in. It's just a shop light. It's not the high output tubes. It's standard. I believe they are, I want to say 36 watt, 4-foot T8s. And again, this is just a standard shop light. And that's about all there is to it. They're fairly cheap. Whenever you buy something that's really inexpensive, you run the risk of them breaking. Out of the 5 of these units I have, because I do have these as actual shop lights in various parts of my basement, I think out of the 5 units I have, in the last 5 years, 2 of them have stopped working, both of which happened within the first few weeks of having them. So I think if they don't go bad pretty much right off the bat, then you're good to go with them. But again, it's a little bulky, it's a little unsightly, it doesn't necessarily look very pleasant, it does just look like a shop lamp sitting on top of your tank. Pros is this cost me $11 and some change. The 2 tubes that go in there are another $7.88. So for around $20, I've got this ready to go. And these are high quality, or at least, you know, brand name. I believe these are Sylvania tubes, 6500K. These tubes are, the tubes themselves came with this fixture, and I believe the fixture was around $90 when I bought it, $85 or something like that. The tubes came with it, but to replace these tubes are $12 or $14 a piece. So that is a downside. The upside is that they are high output. They're 54 watts each. So you get much more light in your tank if you've got a planted tank or a tank that you're really trying to show off, a nice really display tank. These definitely make for better lights, but $80, $90 versus $20, that's to me something worth considering when you're looking at the 2 lights. So there's some pros and cons to each one. For this, I always just put it on a plug strip that's got other tanks on it anyway, so it doesn't really matter that it doesn't have its own on-off switch as far as I'm concerned. I just hit a switch on a strip and multiple tanks go on or off at the same time. So that's why I have some of these other fixtures, but I no longer buy these when I need lights for a tank. It's just not worth it to me. The additional money I'm spending for the additional features is all well and good, but is it really worth, you know, 5 times the amount of money or 4 times the amount of money? To me, it's not. To me, just putting a simple shop lamp on top of my tank suffices. So I'm going to get back to waiting for the tank to fill up. You can see a little bit of the foam and suds. This is where the hydrogen peroxide that was on the surface of the rocks is now, you know, being rinsed into the water as the water raises as I fill the tank back up. So hang on a little bit and we will get the tank put back together. Again, I figured out sort of how I think I want to position these lights, and we will see that next. So that's what I've settled on for the time being. We're still fresh off the water change, so I've still got some bubbles in the tank and whatever, but I'm not going to worry too much about that. I want to keep moving today. I've got some other stuff I want to get done. So this is going to be our final look at what I'm going to do today. If you'll notice, I've got a lot of the sparkly effect from the LEDs down on the left, and off to the right you see very little of that. And the reason being, I actually wound up putting, let's see how well this comes out. I put 3 of the LED units on this end, directly under where the power head is. I also adjusted the power head to be much closer to the surface so that I get a lot of ripple, a lot of agitation directly below one of the LED units. So that is for this end. Each section is a 2-foot section. So then my 4-foot shop lamp and my Coralife go right here. And this works out well because the rear section is much wider and the shop lamp sits on that nicely. And then the forward section is much narrower, and my narrower T5 fixture fits on that nicely. So if I have to, I can still open these lids. It just has to sort of lift the light up along with it. I have set it up so I have one lid here, whatever you want to call that, that I can open up without actually having to move anything around or adjust the lights or anything. So I'll be able to feed the tank and get in there, at least at this end, for anything I might need to do. I'm a little dubious about whether or not I'm going to keep both lights on there. That is with both fixtures, the shop lamp and the T5. And look at it without the T5 fixture on. So there's still plenty of light in there, but the lack of light in the forward part of the tank simply offers more texture. The shadows and shading you get are actually what give you depth and texture when you look into the tank. We won't be able to turn that fixture back on right now because, as I said, I just turned it off, and so it's going to be about 5 minutes before I can turn it back on after it's cooled off. But you really do get a different sense of what the tank looks like. There must be some stuff floating on the surface. It's up there looking for... trying to figure out what he's doing. Sometimes when they go darting up to the surface, they actually see little bits of flakes or whatever, and I've actually heard them hit the glass. They really do come out of the water quite violently when they are feeding. So, not really sure what he's excited about. At any rate, don't know whether or not I'm going to use both of those lights or not. The shop lamp is two 36-watt tubes. If I turn on the T5 unit, that's another 104 watts I'm adding, and that all adds up. You know, I do have to pay for all the electricity on all these various tanks and power heads and heaters and filters and lights and everything else. So if I can knock 100 watts off of one of these tanks, that's worth it. I just don't know whether or not I like the shading or I like the brightly lit. So that's something we can play with. It's something I can just leave sit there, and on times I want to turn it on, I can turn it on, and times I want it off, I can leave it off. That is an option as well. So there you have it. That's what the tank is going to look like right now for the most part, except it will be covered up again. Let me see if I can pull this over real quickly. Well, I just knocked it loose off of the whole tank now. So there is your final look at what the tank is going to look like, at least for the time being. I was able to also get in there and replant a few of those plants that have been knocked loose and were floating along at the surface, but that's no big deal and not really worth talking about. So, thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed. Please subscribe if you're not already. You never know what you're going to get with me. My next project that we're going to be working on is going to be this tank. This is my Black Ghost Knifefish tank, and it just needs a water change, a plant grooming, and the glass wiped down very badly, as you can tell. So once again, thank you for watching. Please subscribe. You don't want to miss this or any other videos I got coming up. So I hope you enjoyed it, and I'll see you real soon on the next one.